Hey everyone, I asked this question about 2 years ago if you wanted to see me build my flip-top outfeed table. Finally, I'm able to show you that video, and this is the process. And by the way, I will have plans available for this build, and they are linked below in the description. It took me about a month and a half to build, and as you can see the design, it's done as a double flip-top outfeed table. So there's a center bank of drawers with two flip-tops, one on each side. And just so there's no confusion, you'll notice that the design that I have or that I'm building is going to be slightly smaller than what the actual plans are. I had to do this because just the way my shop is laid out and just the size of it, I don't have the full width of my outfeed table that I'm able to use in this shop. Now this build took 5 sheets of plywood, 1 sheet of 1/4 inch and 4 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood. And you can see here me struggling without an outfeed table, so I'm excited to finally be able to add this back to my shop. Now really, all you see me do so far in this video is break down that sheet goods. And right now, I'm just laying out what the cutouts are for the sides of the case for the outfeed table. I figured out this trick when I built my miter saw station, and that's just to use a stop block on the back side of the bandsaw. So when you're making larger cuts, it just makes it a lot easier to be able to get those consistent. And you can see there's quite a few little notches that need to be marked out. And I actually saved the scraps from this because these are used to just beef up the material just along the bottom, so I'm able to add threaded inserts for leveling feet. And the threaded inserts are really just glued straight through the middle of those 2 chunks after, of course, the glue is dried. And they're just hammered in, and then I can add a carriage bolt just to be able to level out the piece of furniture in my shop. My shop floor has a massive heave towards the middle, so leveling furniture is always a joy. So I've used these almost on every single project that I've built as far as shop furniture. With that done, I was able to put the sides to the side and cut all the supporting rails for the back side as well as the toe kicks for the front. Whenever I'm doing something like this, especially with a lot of very similar size pieces, I always make sure to label everything just with green tape and Sharpie so I don't get confused. Now the plans will give you a shopping list of all the materials that you'll need. This is just iron pipe that's used, and I'm setting up to drill out for the pivots. And I thought the easiest way to do this was to use my drill press. So this is a great example of one of the other flip tops I have in my shop. And in fact, this one's in my miter saw. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link that below. But I quickly realized that trying to hold those side pieces up against the drill press was not the easiest or safest idea. So I made a drilling jig that was 2-sided, so I was able to have left sides and right sides without having to build 2 separate jigs, and it just made it super consistent to be able to drill these holes in the pivoting point for the supports. Now, even instructions on how to build this jig will be included in the plans. Now, one thing I realized when I was actually editing this video is I could have attached the top support to the top side of the side and then drill my hole at once, as opposed to using the iron pipe, which you see me doing here to make sure that everything is square. But I guess lesson learned, if you're building this, then hey, do it that way. Don't necessarily do it the way I did. And one other thing which was a bit of a struggle was putting this together on my own. I was able to do it with the help of some clamps, but it definitely was a challenge doing it this way as opposed to just getting an extra set of hands to build out the cabinet. And you can see here just how narrow that middle drawer is. Again, the flip tops are a consistent size as the plans will show, but for my shop I had to make the drawers a little bit smaller just to accommodate the size of my shop. I also had to make some relief cuts on the inside back, so I was able to add room for the dust collection that goes to the back of my table saw. A big priority on this version, and in fact this is the second version of this outfeed table that I've built, is having integrated power. So I found this really cool power strip that I was able to add to kind of the center section, and I also wired in the power for the 2 tools that are in the flip top, and I'll go over that in a little bit. But if you have questions about the electrical in this build, I'm probably not going to answer those. I'm not an electrician. This is just something I've kind of learned myself, and there's way better tutorials out there on doing any kind of electrical. But as you can see here, I have USB power as well as 2 power strips along the front, and here I am clumsily bringing in the tabletop, which, yeah, that's carbon fiber. I won't go over that in this build. If you have questions about that tabletop in particular, I will have a separate video about building the carbon fiber tabletop. This was something that Total Boat sent me the carbon fiber for, and I'm super excited about how it looks in the shop and just how it's actually wearing over time. But I'll have a second video for this, so make sure you're subscribed if you do want to see how I built this tabletop. Now, this was probably the most intimidating part of this process. It took me about a week to make this tabletop, and I just took my time with green tape and just marking out all my measurements to be able to cut out where each of the tools were going to go in this flip top. I also checked for square just by measuring corner to corner to make sure that my measurements, and I was actually bang on this. The track saw is the tool that made this as simple as it could be. Of course, you could use a skill saw and a straight edge, but the track saw for me just made this an absolute breeze. Sneaking up to the corners were a little tough, so I just went back with the chisel and I pared that down, just cleaning up those areas before removing the tape. And man, that was satisfying, peeling that tape and just seeing that crisp edge on the carbon fiber. Oh look, another flip top. Anyways, the iron pipe that I was using was about 1 millimeter too big for the largest size, or I guess the most appropriate sized Forstner bit that I had, and it didn't really work the way I needed it to, so I ended up just using this flush trim bit from Bits and Bits and made a jig on the CNC that was the appropriate size for the iron pipe. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you are building this, just that you have the right size Forstner bit, because you don't want those holes to be too sloppy. But as well, you want to make sure that there's enough room for your iron pipe to actually fit through. What I'm doing here is I decided kind of as a game time decision to do the side supports of the flip top in a hardwood. And my thought process there was just drilling into the hardwood. It'd be less likely to split apart as opposed to, just using the same plywood that I was using for everything else. Now, the top is not load bearing. There's no weight that is being pulled down on that show face, so I just glued that in place and then cut out a relief kind of through the middle support, just so I was able to feed through the extension cord, which you'll see me do in a second here. Big thanks to Evolution Power Tools. They actually sent me this cold cutting chop saw, particularly for this build. This fits so well in my little shop. I don't have a lot of reasons to cut metal, but just with some of the motorcycle parts and other things that we've been doing lately, it's definitely going to come in handy. I'm going to post some links in the description below. And if you are looking to pick up one of these saws, there'll actually be a discount coupon, so you can do that. And thanks to Evolution Power Tools for sending us this cold cutting metal chop saw. It's pretty awesome, and we're excited to have it in the shop. So as you can see, I'm taking a little bit of material, and this is actually off the back side of the flip top, the side that faces in. I should have cut a little bit more off of where the flip top was. And by the way, just a real good pro tip, if you're cutting carbon fiber on your saw stop, it is conductive, so you will trip the brake. Ask me how I know. With the flip top supports in place, I was able to feed through all of the wiring. And again, there's lots of tutorials on how to do this wiring on other channels, but the cool thing about this is there's always power to each of the tools on both sides, and all you have to do is flip them over and they're powered up and ready to go. This is a massive improvement over my last version of this, but I'm so glad that I saw other people actually do this same setup in their flip tops, and for sure took that idea to add into my own. This was a good moment. This is legit the first time flipping this over. One thing I do want to point out is we did put paste wax on all of the touching surfaces on the pivots, just to make sure that there was as little friction as possible. Now, the flip tops at this point were done, so I could move on to building all the drawer parts. And a key thing that I always do whenever I'm building drawers is I cut my sides first, and then I actually lay them in place alongside of the drawer slides, and then I measure from there to figure out if I have the correct measurement for what my drawer front and my drawer back will be. This will give you better fitting drawers and just make the process a lot easier. Also, when I do drawers, I embed the 1/4 inch bottom into all 4 sides. It's a little bit more messing around to be able to do it this way, but for me, I just find that this is the easiest way to build drawers. And of course, pocket holes are the only way to assemble drawers, and just make sure that you're putting those on the front and back outside faces. That way you'll never actually see the pocket holes anywhere in your drawers when you're doing them. Now, to space out my drawers, I typically will use just a couple scraps of plywood, and then my inset, because this is push to open, I just have a jig that I've always held on to because I tend to use these drawer slides a lot. These are the centerline drawer slides, push to open drawer slides from Rockler, and Rockler's been a huge supporter of my channel probably for the past 3 years, so huge thanks to Rockler for their support. These drawer slides are awesome, super heavy duty, full extension. The one downfall to this project for sure was the fact that I didn't have enough drawer slides though, and just because of shipping, I wasn't able to get ones from Rockler in time, and you can see here how awesome the Amazon basic ones were. Those will need to be replaced. I added the end caps. This really is just to hide that iron pipe, and then we were able to apply finish, and the finish we used was the Halcyon Clear from Total Boat, and this is kind of my go-to finish for a lot of things. For a pop of color, I just painted the drawer fronts this flag blue and this orange, I don't even know what it was, just that I've had kicking around for a while. Not to match the tools, just to match kind of the theme I have going in the shop. And with that, this build was done. Like I said, this was the second version of this outfeed table, and I could not be happier with how this project turned out. Built-in power, double flip tops, and a little bit of storage. This outfeed table suits my needs perfectly. But not only my needs, my wife recently has started a new hobby, so like when we were dating, I had to clean out a drawer for her, so she had room in the shop for her tools as well. And maybe a toothbrush. If you haven't been following along on Instagram, you probably don't know that Erin's kind of developed this new hobby of carving in skateboard noses and tails. It's been a lot of fun to watch her do this, and I love the fact that she's hanging out in the shop when I'm working on other projects as well. I've got some other stuff coming up, so hopefully if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. And here's some other projects or other shop builds that you can check out. But we'll see you guys on the next build.